full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hey, folks, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. Happy Friday. You've made it. Thanks for starting the beginning of your weekend with us here, the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine here. Wrapping up this week, we still have been talking a little bit about Hong Kong. Board saying Hong Kong strong, and, just got to wonder if Arkansas's leadership, just want to reiterate, we're going to talk about this a little bit later at the bottom of this hour. If Arkansas's leadership, though, were to come out and be like, hey, we support a free Hong Kong, do you think that all of our Chinese deals would officially go away and dry up? And I don't know if they'll ever happen. I'll be very surprised if they ever happen based on the new rule that came out of our government this week, the State Department making a new rule saying that if there's any Chinese nationals that plan to talk with local state government officials, that they've got to check in with the State Department and let them know that they're going to be having a meeting. So that would mean if the Arkansas Economic Development Commission decides to take a meeting with Chinese people, or people from the Chinese government, then they'd have to let the State Department know. I just think that's going to be an extra step. It shows you that it's not a good idea, that there are people that essentially our federal government's foreign policy towards China conflicts with the state of Arkansas's economic development agenda with the communist Chinese. I mean, that's essentially, I think, what is evident at this point. We got a great show for you today. Got a lot of news to get to. Donald Trump's rally in Dallas. Also, at the top of the next hour, we're going to be talking with Pastor Iverson Jackson. Many of you out there who've gone to conservative rallies across the state of Arkansas have heard Pastor Jackson speak. He's really, really dynamic, really wise, got a lot of wisdom. There's this event coming up on Tuesday. It's hosted by State Representative Dan Sullivan, the Quest for Quality event. So we will be talking to Pastor Jackson coming up at 7:05. He's scheduled to speak at that event in Tuesday, Northeast Arkansas, as well as State Representative Dan Sullivan at the bottom of the hour at 7:33. Now, what does that mean, Quest for Quality? Well, I mean, what exactly is quality of life? Because we do have a lot of people, throwing around this idea, in our communities. What does it actually mean? Is it just more stuff? Is it have something? Does it have something to do with trying to help those who are on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale? What does it actually mean? There'll be several speakers there, as a matter of fact, on Tuesday. Iverson Jackson, Dr. Philip Fletcher from Conway. We're going to be talking to him on Monday. He's the founder and executive director of the City of Hope Outreach in Conway. The mission is to provoke hope in individuals, families, and communities for the glory of God. Also, Felicia Johnson, she's going to be on the program on Monday as well, real estate agent. I talked to her yesterday about this idea of quality of life, and it was really, really good. So I think it's, I can't wait to talk to Dan as well, talking to him later in the show. Like, what was the purpose of this? What are we hoping to accomplish having this conversation with leaders in the community? What are we trying to accomplish here? So we'll talk to him about that. Now, let's kind of dive in. The president was in Dallas last night. From One American News Network, this piece: Trump blasts crazy Nancy Pelosi and Democrats, defends Syria pullout. I'm going to get to the defending Syria pullout here in a minute, but the first thing I want you to see is this. While President Trump is seeing these massive crowds, there are some people saying that if the president goes back to Dallas, he's going to need Cowboy Stadium instead of the arena where he was. He's going to need to go to Cowboy Stadium because there were so many people there, so much enthusiasm. The lines were out the door. Obviously, they had the bailout crowd like they normally do. And in the midst of that, in the midst of seeing all these numbers, in the midst of seeing Texas turn out to support President Donald Trump, to go to one of his exciting rallies to hear what he has to say, Tom Arnold, the C-list of actors, I don't know if we could call him a C-list actor, he's more like a D-list actor, decides to tweet this. Don't get too cocky, traitor. They showed up for JFK too. Look at this. Now, many people reported this actor, if you want to call him that, Tom Arnold, to the Secret Service because the implication is because JFK was assassinated in Dallas that, that there was, the implication is that he's going to get assassinated in Dallas. That Tom Arnold and the radical left, I wonder what Tom Arnold has to lose. I mean, all these people that are deranged by Trump, not that just maybe people disagree with this or that, or maybe you don't like what he says on Twitter or whatever, but the people that actually want him dead. You know what the funniest meme I saw the other day? It was from 4_touchdowns, Joe. You know, the meme guy that we always use. It was a fake quote from Donald Trump in 1980. And it said, I don't understand why all these time travelers keep trying to come back in time and kill me. I'm just a realtor. Donald Trump, 1980. It's like the funniest meme I've seen in a long time. Making up fake quotes that Donald Trump was dealing with time travel assassination attempts back in 1980. It's pretty good. But, so, anyway, what's interesting is if you go on the Twitter sphere, it is not lost on some people that the President of the United States of America is such an agent of change that there are people. I saw one tweet from a guy who was asking for the American people to pray for the president and his safety because he was going to Dallas, Texas. I'm not kidding you. I saw a tweet where people are like, hey, you know what? It's going to Dallas. There's a lot of people starting to compare what Donald Trump is doing to what JFK, in many ways, was doing as well during his presidency. And I know you start to borderline on conspiracy theories at that point, but I'm just telling you, I mean, it's all over Twitter. With people who are essentially not pundits, not they're not employed news people. It's not mainstream, but I mean, you wouldn't believe how many people are thinking the same thing. And so that's why when Tom Arnold kind of confirms this, he's on the radical left, and he's essentially hoping that the same thing that happened to JFK when he visited Dallas is the same thing that, they wanted to happen to Trump last night. But of course, it didn't, thank God. And here we are. But I just wonder, will the radical, will the Secret Service be paying Tom Arnold a visit? Quote, they showed up for JFK too. I mean, some of these people who are so unhinged against President Trump, I really just wonder what kind of skeletons do they have in their closet? You know what I'm saying? And you got to remember, if you want to know my honest opinion, I want all of those documents that were related to Jeffrey Epstein. Hey, remember Jeffrey Epstein? I want those released. Remember Jeffrey Epstein? Nobody talks about him anymore. I mean, isn't that crazy that you had legitimate articles in the last month talking about Hillary Clinton maybe preparing for another run, and not one of them mentions the fact that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself in his jail cell? All of a sudden, a month later, 2 months later, oh, Hillary Clinton could try to make another run at it. We should say, what? Are you kidding me? It's ridiculous. So that's that. Let's listen to what did the president say, actually. Joe, go ahead and start to cue this YouTube video out, but first I'm going to read a little bit. One American News, Steve Holland. U.S. President Donald Trump defended his Syria pullout at a campaign rally on Thursday, lashed out at Crazy Nancy. Quote, listen to this. I think this is true. The more America achieves, the more hateful and enraged these crazy Democrats become. Tom Arnold's a perfect example of that. We hope same thing that happened to JFK in Dallas happens to you. They're crazy, Trump said. Crazy Nancy. That Nancy she is crazy. Sounds like a Dr. Seuss book. I've been reading a lot of Dr. Seuss. bedtime stories. You know what I mean? I think my favorite one is, "Oh, the places you'll go." Quote, back to this article. He told the Dallas crowd his approach was unconventional when it came to Syria. By the way, huge news yesterday. The delegation led by Vice President Mike Pence, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, negotiating peace. It appears there was an underlying strategy this whole time. Now you say, Paul, there wasn't a strategy, he just pulled out. Well, first of all, pulling out's a very popular thing, so that just might have been the strategy in and of itself, but I don't think it was. I think the president was trying to get people to come to the table and make a deal, and now there's a ceasefire, and they're going to pull out. They are going to maintain that buffer zone, but we'll see what happens. The president last night said that his approach to Syria and Turkey was unconventional. Do you think so? Yeah, I definitely think so. Listen to what he said. Here's President Donald Trump last night. This is, if you've been listening to my interpretation of what Donald Trump's trying to do, resetting this concept of what an American president is supposed to do in relation to the mentality they're supposed to have when it comes to our soldiers' lives. Listen to this.
And as you all know, I guess you've been watching today, I sent Vice President Pence and Secretary of State Pompeo to lead an American delegation to meet with President Erdogan of Turkey. They got there today, and it did work.
Yep. Media hates it, though.
Without
the media don't want
spilling
to
a
cover
drop of American blood, not one drop of American blood.
See what I'm saying? Not one drop of American blood.
We've all agreed on a pause or a ceasefire in the border region of Syria. And it was unconventional what I did. I said, they're going to have to fight a little while. Sometimes you have to let them fight a little while. Then people find out how tough the fighting is. These guys know right up here. These guys know.
Sometimes you have to let them fight a little while.
Sometimes you have to let them fight. It's like two kids in a lot. You got to let them fight, and then you pull them apart. But it was unconventional. But they fought for a few days, and it was pretty vicious. And the Kurds, who are our friends, and Turkey's our friend. But they fought. It was tougher. I mean, it was nasty. And you couldn't make a deal for 15, think of it, for 15 years, 20 years, they couldn't make a deal. The Kurds didn't want to move. Turkey didn't want to budge. And Turkey was having a lot of bad things happen from this region, in all fairness to Turkey. They were having a lot of bad, but they didn't want to. Now all of a sudden they're fighting, and it's not fun having bullets going all over the place. And we went there, and we said, we want to pause. And the Kurds have been terrific. They're going to move back a little bit. We're going to keep ISIS all nice and locked up. Okay? We're going to find more of them.
All right, stop. And the Congress is trying to pass even more sanctions. They don't think the sanctions are enough or the deal's enough or whatever. But let me just tell you something. Nobody wants to give the president credit for this because they just don't like it that he's making these big bold moves. But I will remind you that this quest for peace has been something that was the left's issue for 30 years. Now it's no longer the left's issue. They hate the president, and they just want to be complete hypocrites. Bringing our troops home. There's another part in that rally last night where he said, we're bringing the troops home, and people they just freaked out, man. They loved it. Absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. So he said a couple of things there. We just did this without spilling one drop of American blood, number one. Now, what was the threat? Economic sanctions, like using our economy as a foreign policy weapon, which is something we don't really do anymore. We are now. We don't want to be in these endless wars in the Middle East. This, in spite of what George W. Bush says, or Mitt Romney, or any of these other guys that have had it their way for the last, essentially half a century. No, we're not going to do it their way anymore. We're going to at least try something different. They got the nerve to say, Mitt Romney has the nerve to say that Trump's actions destabilize the region. America going in destabilizes the region. We've seen this in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and Libya. We weren't going to do it again in Syria, even though President Obama, do you remember when Obama tried to go and bomb Damascus in 2012 and he stopped at the last minute? Because people on the left, right, and the middle were like, we don't want to go to another war, Mr. President. And the left was like, I'm glad Obama didn't do it. People on the right were like, I'm glad Obama didn't do it. Now all of a sudden that's all out the window and the media wants a war. All you need to know is that ABC cropped video footage to try to make it worse than it was. That's all you need to know. That means every bit of their other reporting is suspect, and that's very dangerous. That's extremely dangerous because it's getting to the point where it doesn't matter what the media reports, I'm going to believe the opposite because I don't believe them about anything else. And that actually is very dangerous because if something ever does actually happen that's bad or atrocious or whatever, I'm not going to believe it. I'm just being honest with you folks. Because I don't trust their sources. Now, I am reminded, he's saying it's unconventional. The president saying, you know what, we pulled out. Sometimes you got to let them fight a little bit. Then they realize, I don't like all of these bullets flying back and forth. But what's his mentality? The president's mentality is not one drop of American blood. And I can't help this. You'll have to forgive me. But there's an old Star Trek episode with Captain James T. Kirk. William Shatner. It's called A Taste of Armageddon. I've referenced this on the show before, but let me just set this up for you. This was when the wagon train to the stars, the USS Enterprise, they come upon two planets that have been at war with one another for 500 years. And it used to be a conventional war where they would send spaceships to one planet and bomb, and the other would do vice versa. They would send missiles to each other. They would bomb and destroy their civilizations. And then eventually they said, you know what, let's come to a treaty. We hate each other so much, we're going to come to a treaty. But the treaty is going to consist of, we're going to put a disintegration machine on your planet and monitor it. You're going to put a disintegration machine on our planet, and we will have the computers do war games, and we'll just decide that X amount of your people have to die today because we just did a successful bombing. And then all of your infrastructure remains intact, but you've got to get X amount of people to report within 24 hours to the disintegration chamber. Spock actually remarks that there was one way in. They go in, but there's no exit, right? And so Captain James T. Kirk, you know what he does? He destroys the disintegration machine. So they're not going to be able to make their quota, which means, guess what? The horrors of war come back. And this is actually a quote from the script. He said, after he destroys the machines, James T. Kirk, yes, I do. I've given you back the horrors of war. The Vindicans now assume that you've broken your agreement and that you're preparing to wage real war with real weapons. They'll want to do the same, only the next attack they'll launch will do a lot more than count up numbers in a computer. They'll destroy cities, devastate your planet. You, of course, will want to retaliate. If I were you, I'd start making bombs. Yes, councilman, you have a real war on your hands. You can either wage it with real weapons, or you might consider an alternative. Put an end to it and make peace. Isn't that what President Trump just did here? I'm sorry to bring in the science fiction reference. I can't help it. Isn't that kind of what he did here? Nobody was touching our troops. You know what I'm saying? Now, there's some reports saying that Turkey was going to go ahead and invade anyway. But as long as our troops were there, they weren't going to touch us. Because we would bring fire and fury, pull them out. Now, guess what? It appears that the conflict is at least somewhat neutralized. Now, we'll see if it holds. You never know. In that area of the world, nothing's going to surprise me because they've had this sectarian tribal wars going on, for 100 years or more. But isn't that incredible? I mean, the horrors of war. Like we have, I've got this other quote here from this script. It was fun actually getting to read the script, trying to, hearing William Shatner's delivery of these lines in my head. Cross your fingers. Death, destruction, disease, horror. That's what war is all about. That's what makes it a thing to be avoided. You've made it neat and painless, so neat and painless, you've had no reason to stop it, and you've had it for 500 years. Since it seems to be the only way I can save my crew, my ship, I'm going to end it for you, one way or another. Isn't that what we've done in the Middle East over the last 19 years? We've made war essentially neat and painless, other than the fact that we're losing American troops by not allowing our troops to actually, when we go to war, obliterate the enemy. And that's the only kind of war that you should fight. It should be short. But we'd have to start calculating, what's the end game? What is actually a just war in this case? Folks, it's Johnny Cash Friday. We're going to take a break. Let me know, what do you think about Donald Trump's strategy in Syria? The media is never going to give him credit. I mean, even if you think, okay, there's some wins and losses, there's certainly not going to be an objective analysis from any mainstream outlet when it comes to this particular issue. We're going to take a break. Don't go anywhere. Back in just a moment.
So the drill by now. We have these segments where we want to highlight small business. We call them small business spotlights. Specifically, we love to highlight Arkansas small businesses. And so I have on the line Mr. Will Hansen is with us. And Will owns Hansen Brothers Construction. You can find out more going to HansenBrothersConstruction.com. Will, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that you could spend some time with us this morning. And I really, got to talk to you just a little bit. I appreciate your story. We like to, highlight Arkansas small business as the backbone of the economy, and just, share with everybody just the benefit of what small businesses do for, individuals and employees and everything else. So what can you tell us about how you got involved in the industry that you're in right now?
Yeah, well, I just kind of grew up in construction. My grandparents had a construction company here in Fayetteville, and so that was something that I grew up with and I was familiar with. And I just liked using my hands and building things. And so I went to college at the U of A, and then I worked for a finance company for about a year and decided that wasn't for me. I needed to do something different. So I came home and just my grandparents had passed away, so the business wasn't really existing. So over the past probably 4 or 5 years, I've been kind of trying to go through some of their old paperwork and plans and kind of teach myself how this whole process works, and then just kind of started this construction company. For me, it's just a lot of fun seeing kind of tangible progress in a fairly short amount of time. You start on a job and it's just a blank piece of land, and then by the time you're done, mostly what I do is custom homes. And so, by the time you're done, you kind of have the complete project of somebody's vision that you put together in just a few months. So yeah. I really enjoy that.
Yeah, I bet that is. I talk to a lot of people who love jobs where they have, a beginning, middle, and an end, being able to actually complete something, move on to something else. And that's gotta
absolutely.
Be like,
it definitely is good to have those start and end points.
Yeah, it's like very fulfilling. I mean, I like it. Anytime I start on a project and that happens, it's extremely rewarding. Your mission, I'm going to talk about the mission here for a second. This is right on the website. Will Hansen grew up in a construction environment. He gained a passion for building houses as he worked alongside his father and brother.
Gateway Pundit's Jim Hoft is reporting that the Drudge Report loses it, goes full on Never Trump, and has actually lost 1/5 of its audience over the last couple of months, lost 200 million page views. What happened to the top conservative publisher, Matt Drudge? He's turned on Donald Trump. It's no secret. Trump lost Drudge. Paul Sperry reports it's official. Drudge has turned on the president, is in the tank for impeachment with headlines like Gallup, 52% support Trump impeachment, just like Nixon. For the past week, the Drudge Report has posted screaming headlines pushing President Trump's impeachment. At the same time, Drudge has ignored President Trump's 50% Rasmussen approval rating, 5 points higher than Barack Obama at the same time in his presidency. Drudge knows better. He doesn't care. He wants President Trump gone. And then they've got the numbers here. In July, Drudge Report dropped below 800 million views. At one time, it was over 1 billion views a month, just so you know. Wildly successful. So far, it's been a drop of 200 million monthly readers. So, anyway, it's a big win for the left, by the way, when Matt Drudge is starting to come around to impeachment.
You were sharing some of that with us. As a teenager, Will had the opportunity to travel to Mexico with his church and build a house for a family. That experience changed his view of the world forever. He was troubled by the disparity between the difficult living conditions he witnessed in Mexico and those of comfort he saw in the United States. What can you tell us? Expand on that for us.
Well, that really kind of started. I was in college from 2009 to 2013, and so that was kind of when, Tom's was really coming to the scene, and that one-for-one model was starting out, and it was pretty effective at marketing. And so, growing up in construction, I was familiar with the cost of building. And so, the average house in America is $250,000 plus. So when I went to Mexico and I realized that we were building these houses with a group of high school students for about $3,000 in material, and it totally changed these people's lives. So we were building in the Baja Peninsula of Mexico, which is right just south of California. And so there's a lot of fields. Most people there work in agriculture. And so, there's not a lot of diversity in the industry there. They're kind of just forced to do this one occupation. And so the living conditions are really the hardest part. They're living in kind of makeshift houses with just really whatever they can find and then saving up for a house. And so what I found when I went down there was that a lot of these families kind of had the choice between saving for a house or sending their children to school, because in Mexico, you have to, for your kid to go to school, you have to provide the books and the uniforms and all the material that they need for school. It's not provided. And so most of the times the parents were kind of put in that situation of, are we going to have a safe house that we can lock the door, our stuff's not going to get stolen, it's not going to get rained on us, or are we going to send our children to school? And so we found that, by building these houses in Mexico, we could do it. I started with a youth group. We could do it with probably 10 kids in a week. We'd go down there and build it, $3,000 in material, and it totally changes people's life, because after that they had, a roof that didn't leak. They had electricity. They had a bathroom. They had a concrete floor, so they were out of the dirt. And so that really just seemed like something pretty tangible that, from a construction aspect, that I thought I could bring home and hopefully make a difference with. So
yeah,
that was kind of one of the big starting points for me starting this construction company. Was like, well, if the average house of a cost of a house in America is $250,000, let's try to find a way to work in about $3,000 to $4,000 to build a house and pass this on. So we've been working on that over the past couple of years, and so that's kind of developed from a mission trip to a more sustainable model. Right now we're in Uganda at a refugee camp called Chaka 2, and so that services, I think they get about 200 refugees a week from the surrounding war-torn countries.
Now, let me stop you there.
Okay.
If people are just joining us, I want you to know we're talking with Arkansas small business owner Will Hanson. Now, he is the owner of HansonBrothersConstruction.com, Hanson Brothers Construction. You can go to HansonBrothersConstruction.com to find out more. We've been showing them the website this whole time, Will. And your experience in Mexico, to talk a little bit about this, the Carpenter Project, because you mentioned Uganda, but I want to make sure we talk about the Carpenter Project because that's where this aid is going through. It's going by means of this organization, the Carpenter Project.
Yes, sir, that's right. So the way that we do it is when I started my construction company, I didn't want it just to be for me. I wanted it to, not more than a business, really. I wanted it to have a purpose and just kind of fall in line with my core values. And for me, that a tangible way to do that was donating a percentage of the profits that we make from construction jobs to build houses for families in need around the world. So we've kind of done a few different projects in a couple different countries.
All right.
We started in Mexico.
Significant victory this week. There's a big victory this week in Northeast Arkansas, and I think really for everybody who is very disturbed by the lack of, just how a lot of people are accepting it to be politically incorrect to talk about the transgender movement in a way that is based in science, logic, and, I don't know, morality, traditional American values. Here's the thing. The Craighead County Public Library decided to host a guest author, which is a trans person, who wrote a successful book. where the character in the book is also trans. And you know what? That's fine. I mean, we could have a discussion, and the taxpayers of Craighead County, honestly, if they wanted to, they could probably, with their tax dollars, decide to do something different if they wanted to. But you know what? I'm okay with the First Amendment. I believe in the First Amendment. I believe in freedom of speech. I believe in opinions. I believe in authors that I disagree with, their lifestyles or whatever, that perfectly support their right to live how they want to live, because I know the alternative would be a world where if public opinion changes, people may not want me to be able to live the way I want to live. So I am totally 100% on board. The issue that many in the community of Craighead County had was the fact that local schools were going to be using taxpayer dollars to bus minor children in to hear this author. And that is just, especially when you look at the concept of, this transgender movement, which is very confusing, and I'm going to get into why it's confusing here in a moment. But when you look up that up until recently in peer-reviewed scientific, studies, this was considered to be a form of psychosis or psychological problem akin to some people who have body dysmorphia that believe that they should have been born without less one arm. And now that used to be treated, and now people are saying, you know what, maybe we should have the surgery and you can amputate your arm because you think you were supposed to be born with only one arm. These are actually psychological conditions that used to be discussed openly, and now they're going back. They're deleting this thought because they're now saying that the LGBT movement, that the T is kind of linked in with all of these other movements. And we can talk about the slippery slope and how everybody that said this was a slippery slope to begin with was correct. Absolutely 100% correct. But there's a fine line between what has happened in the past and what is attempting to happen now, because the argument is inconsistent. And I'm going to tell you that why here in a minute. But before I do, I just have to highlight the editor of the Jonesboro Sun. His name is Chris Wessel. I know Chris not well, but I have met him. I met him years ago when he moved to Jonesboro. And he was writing, and I have to say I have watched an evolution of his writing on issues, and I have watched him become and move more and more to the left on this issue. And so he writes this editorial because he's upset that conservatives in the community were able to stop the busing of minor children with taxpayer dollars to hear a trans author. The superintendents of the schools around the Jonesboro area said, you know what, we're not going to do this. Okay, now they said it was because, now of safety issues, because the issue was raised. But I think that's just a PC way to say, we're not going to do this. It's a way to give the people in the community what they want without maybe giving them the reason that they want. But it's the fact of the matter is, it was a huge victory for those of us around here who believe in local government. And this goes out to the rest of the people who are listening across the state. This is a big issue because if it hasn't come to your town, it probably will. So the editor of the Jonesboro Sun decides to weigh in this and essentially criticize, I believe, a vast majority of the community. He doesn't. He thinks he's in the majority. I think a vast majority of the community has a problem with busing minor children with taxpayer dollars over to, listen to a transgender author who's, going to be talking about, I presume, this lifestyle, if you will. Now, this is what he said, quote, "There are some regretful, shameful things happening in Jonesboro that are putting the city in a bad light." Now, the last time Chris Wessel wrote an article like this, he was lamenting the fact that the 1% sales tax failed, that the people decided to not raise their taxes. And he said, that may be good for cost of living, but it won't be good for getting progressive companies here that would pay higher wages, presumably creating people that would, I guess, be more progressive and would want to tax themselves more. He was lamenting last time how we have factory jobs in Jonesboro, and those aren't the high-paying jobs. Essentially, those people went to the polls and said, we don't want to pay more taxes because, anyway, that was the last time there was something, bad going on in Jonesboro. There are some regretful, shameful things happening in Jonesboro, he writes, that are putting the city in bad light from both a regional and national perspective. First of all, the national perspective is pretty much irrelevant because when they say national perspective, you know what they mean? New York and Los Angeles and the predominant political opinions that they have. Well, guess what? That's not us. That's not Arkansas. He goes on, first is the city's inability to name a street for slain civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. That's something I hadn't told you guys about, but they've been trying to do that, and I don't know, they're just having trouble doing it, whatever. One of our nation's most iconic leaders of the 20th century. I really don't have an opinion on the issue either way. I mean, sure, rename a street Martin Luther King, don't rename, I don't care. Second is the public outrage about a trans teen author who is scheduled to talk about her award-winning novel. I guess her, does that mean that her is a biological male? Is that what it means? Okay, so it's a man, biological male, that Chris Wessels calling her. All right. Quote, the name of the novel, If I Was Your Girl, on October 22nd at the Craighead County Jonesboro Public Library. Apparently, listen to this, like you can't believe this. This is... Apparently, some folks in Jonesboro and Northeast Arkansas still think it's the 1950s, spreading their unfounded fears and hatred toward those who are different and opposing social norms that were fought and won long ago. Believe me, it doesn't look good to outsiders, especially those who might be interested in starting a business or expanding an industry to Jonesboro. Again, Chris Wessel, I respectfully, I think you're living in a different reality than a lot of people, okay? Much like some folks in the trans community that believe they can just, well, I feel like this, doesn't matter what my genetics say, I feel like this, therefore I am. It's just, oh my goodness, it's kind of sad, actually. Also, I'm not ever going to get on board with, let me affirm someone's delusion so that we can get more jobs. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to get it. He's essentially saying that we're going to lose jobs. There's not going to be industries coming here because people in this community don't want their taxpayer dollars being used to bus minor children in public school over to see a trans teen author promoting this type of lifestyle, this type of I can define my own reality. Even though biologically chromosomes say, here's the issue. You want to know what the issue is, why the trans argument is so confusing? And I'll get back to this article here in a minute because it gets really, really worse. There's a guy by the name of Douglas Murray. Now, Douglas Murray is a British, quote, conservative author. He's gay. So, and I know there are people in America who are gay and consider themselves like fiscally conservative and that sort of thing. But this guy's recently written a book called The Violence of Crowds or I can't find it right now. But anyway, he's written a ton of books. Well, he recently was talking about, and I'll summarize this for you. He said, basically in the 20th century, Americans learned, or people in Western civilization learned, that if you want to get sympathy from everybody else, you have to claim that you were born a certain way, that you were hardwired in a way that this is just how I am, so accept me. So if you wanted to get accepted socially for whatever reason, that you had to claim that this is just who you were. You were not in control of your own actions, and so this is where people came up with this idea that, you were born gay. Okay, I'm born gay. I can't do anything about it. And so you just have to accept me as I am. Now, even Douglas Murray, who is a gay man, says there is a debate to be had over nurture versus nature when it comes to that. And I would, as a Christian, would just reference Romans chapter 1, and I would just tell you that we're all capable of doing all kinds of things. All of us, every one of us, are born into this world capable of anything. But this is what got the gays, the L's and the G's, if you will, as Dave Chappelle says. This is what got them into relevance. I am just born this way, accepted, and move on. Well, so the trans movement saw this, and they said the same thing. And this is basically like a hardware versus a software issue, is what Douglas Murray says. So you come into life and you say, well, this is the hardware I was given. I have no choice, right? The hardware I was given. The trans community comes in and they say that. They say, well, I was born this way. I was born a man inside a woman's body, or I was born a woman inside a man's body. And that was my hardware. But then the trans community has come along and they've now said something else. I'm born a woman in a man's body. That's my hardware. But choosing your gender is software. Now that makes no sense. You can they're now saying your hardware is based on how you feel. But your software they're identifying as chromosomes, which is complete. And Douglas Murray says we're treating hardware like software and software like hardware. So the trans argument falls apart. They have used this I'm born this way argument to get to this point because it's a successful way to be accepted into society that is changing, but it doesn't make any sense if you think about it, right? Treating treating the chromosomes as if that is somehow I can just choose my gender, but I'm born this way. It doesn't make any sense. It honestly doesn't make any sense. Okay, so back to this article. He says, I understand there are strong feelings about both issues, but the boat has sailed. And this is, again, Chris Wessel. Long ago, those who hold on to divisive notions that Martin Luther King Jr., a Nobel Prize peace winner who was assassinated 70 miles from northeast Arkansas, isn't worthy of having a street named after him in Jonesboro, and that LGBTQ people aren't equal in God's eyes and don't deserve discrimination protection, are simply wrong-headed. By the way, I don't know how you combine those two issues. You can't name a street after Martin Luther King Jr., and you're combining that with people that just don't think minors should be bussed over to listen to a trans author, during school hours. That's the thing. Go there on your own accord if you want later. He goes on to say, history will be unkind as it has been in the past to people who have a problem with the trans author, the kids going over there during school hours. He goes on, it's a sad state of affairs when a city council can't muster the courage to name a street after Martin Luther King. The entire committee process, called the Unity Coalition Advisory Committee. I'm going to skip down here because I really think this Martin Luther King thing is irrelevant. Keep going. We're going to skip to this part. As for the trans teen author speaking about a book at the library, some of the negative reaction is simply pitiful, ridiculous, or ridiculing this young person and chastising library staff for having her come speak. Her book won the annual Teen Book Award. Listen to this. The first public complaints were launched October 6th on a Facebook site called Citizens Taxed Enough, the Tea Party group that also opposed and helped defeat the recent 1% sales tax referendum. How ironic. I've gone over this a lot, Chris Wessel. I don't see how that's ironic at all. I don't know how. Maybe I'm missing. I don't see how that's the opposite. I don't see how that's ironic. Matter of fact, I think it's pretty interesting. I think the vast majority of those on Team Jonesboro who supported the tax, again, you could make reasoned arguments to do it. I think the vast majority of those would be on the side of the Citizens Tax Enough for bringing this issue up and trying to protect young, impressionable minds from what, again, is a lifestyle that was once considered a psychosis of some kind until very recently. As a matter of fact, the Heritage Foundation says that sex reassignment doesn't work. Here's the evidence. And it goes on to talk about the reality that sex change is physically impossible. It frequently does not provide the long-term wholeness and happiness that people seek. Unfortunately, many professionals now view healthcare, including mental health care, primarily as a means of fulfilling patients' desires, whatever those desires are, even if they're detrimental. And our brains and our senses are designed to bring us into contact with reality, connecting us with the outside world and with the reality of ourselves. And we now have medical professionals saying no. And they're doing these sex reassignment surgeries, and people are still depressed. And that's why the suicide rate they would say suicide rate among trans is high because they're being discriminated against. It's like, no, it's now being treated as something that is totally 100% legitimate, to say that you are born with these chromosomes, but that doesn't mean anything. You can define your own reality. You can be, just a woman, and that's somehow, a social construct. Again, it doesn't make any sense to say that I'm wired this way. This is my hardware. But gender is a choice when gender is determined by chromosomes. Let me know what you think about this. Telephone number 870-275-9799. Before we go to break, I do want to tell you about Conduit for Commerce. You've heard the ads before, but I want to remind you guys, if you're a taxpayer, if you're a business owner, we all know that the government rarely gives us a break. Big government politicians are always out to get more money from us. There's no question about that. And I would just say, if you like what you're hearing here at Conduit News every morning, we're trying to bring you the truth. I would encourage you to consider giving less money to the government. It's just flowing into Little Rock, and in this case, it's just constantly being spent. And consider giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce. They're the premier organization standing up for small business. It's a non-compromising organization when it comes to things like lower taxes. Does it grow government? Does it spend money we don't have? Does it increase dependency on government? Just go to conduitforcommerce.org, and I want you to click on the Support Our Cause button, and you can give monthly, you can give one time. It's tax-deductible. So give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow less, and give the people that stand up for your values more. Conduit for Commerce. Go to conduitforcommerce.org right now and click on Support Our Cause. Back in just a moment.
In Colombia and Peru, and now through some students at JBU, we've really found a good system in Uganda. And so now we're just working on kind of marketing that to other people who might be interested, because, we've found that when I'm working with people, and I tell them that, this is something that we do, a portion of the profits from their job go towards building a house for these people. Everyone has been super receptive. It seems like something that, people, especially my generation, millennials or younger, seem to, want to spend money on something that they know is doing good somewhere. And so that's really what we're trying to do, is just, do something that, everyone's going to buy a house eventually. So if we can find a way to work that into making a difference for people and alleviating some global poverty and helping some people out, I think that is, kind of the path that we're on right now.
So I want to make sure everybody knows this Carpenter Project. Again, you can go to carpenterproject.org. This is a nonprofit, and so people could give to this and deduct it from their taxes.
That's right. It is a nonprofit. So that's we kind of have two paths of raising money right now. So one of them is kind of the one-for-one model that we're doing, and the other is just for donation. And so either way, we're working on. It costs about $3,000 to build a house. So we're trying to come up with a couple different models that people can come together, or a group or a class or something like that can kind of pool money together. And then, from a new construction is generally we provide the whole $3,000. And so whenever we build a new, custom home, that builds another home in Africa. Wow. Yeah, I'm reading right here. We exist to provide sustainable housing for high-needs refugees. We are currently working to build homes for refugees seeking asylum in Uganda. Man, this has got to be, it's a huge responsibility. And I just think this is one of the reasons I really wanted to highlight, your construction business, because you're not only, providing a service and selling that service for a profit, but you're also giving back, and you do that. I mean, I see here
this verse. Let's see, where did it go? The verse from Isaiah that I saw here, Isaiah 58:12. Tell us about that, about to be the builders of broken walls.
Yeah, that kind of was really the seed that kind of started the whole thing for me. Was I found that on one of my first trips to Mexico, and that really just spoke to me about, I felt like the Lord was really talking to me at that moment of kind of being the rebuilder of broken walls and the repair of dwellings, because that was something I knew how to do. From an early age, I grew up riding around with my grandpa in his truck and pretending to be a builder when I was, 5 years old. And so just growing up in that industry, I was like, hey, this is something that I can do. And especially it hit me just once I left America, how truly blessed that we are to live here. I think that it's kind of our responsibility to help people out. Like, I think that that's one thing that, from whom much is given, much is expected. And I don't take that lightly. I laugh and joke about it because that's what Uncle Ben told Peter Parker when, it kind of motivated him to be Spider-Man, right?
Yeah.
So, I think it's just, when you're given something, I grew up in Fayetteville. When you're given something, I think that we can kind of give back and help people. So, we've done some local projects around here in the Northwest Arkansas area. We've built some decks for some people and handicap ramps and stuff like that. But really, for me, it was just astonishing how in so many parts of the impoverished people around the world, how they live, and how really a small amount of money can make a difference.
Well, and also I'm reading here, when you guys go in there, you're also paying local workers. So you.
Yeah, that's right. That was a really important thing for us, was that we didn't want it to just be something that, some Americans were coming in and we were just going to drop off a house. That was a big criticism that Tom's got, was that they're just dropping off shoes and then leaving. So
yeah, and destroying the market. They would also hurt the other market involved. But if you're actually
to their downfall,
you're actually contributing.
All right, welcome back to the show. 870-275-9799 is the telephone number if you would like to contribute to the program today. Yeah, I mean, you can't really even talk about this issue anymore because it's considered so politically incorrect. The trans part of the LGBT RSTLNE, would you like to buy a Val community? Yeah, I mean, this Heritage Foundation is really good. Here's the thing about this. This was a very obvious thing. It seems to me there are more and more people who don't necessarily understand the political opinions of those who are, the vast majority of those who make up their communities. I mean, whether it's, editor of the Jonesboro Sun, essentially, I think, judging and disparaging the vast majority of the people in the community. Or, I mean, you even could take what Pope County's going through with his casino. How you have local elected officials that are just ignoring the will of the people when it comes to whether or not you want a casino in. They don't want to vote. They don't want to honor the will of the people and have another vote. The people voted to have another vote, and they're now trying to undo that. I mean, that's really frustrating. Very frustrating. We've got one more hour coming your way next. We're going to be talking with Pastor Iverson Jackson coming up here in 5 minutes. Also, State Representative Dan Sullivan coming up at 7:33. And we also want to give you a China update, a Hong Kong strong update. Real question on my mind this entire week is, does Governor Asa Hutchinson support a free Hong Kong? And if he did, would that 100% put the final nail in the coffin of these communist Chinese entities disguised as companies moving into the state of Arkansas? We will be back in just a moment.
In Colombia and Peru, and now through some students at JBU, we've really found a good system in Uganda. And so now we're just working on kind of marketing that to other people who might be interested, because we've found that when I'm working with people and I tell them that this is something that we do, a portion of the profits from their job go towards building a house for these people, everyone has been super receptive. It seems like something that, people, especially my generation, millennials or younger, seem to, want to spend money on something that they know is doing good somewhere. And so that's really what we're trying to do, is just, do something that, everyone's going to buy a house eventually. So if we can find a way to work that into making a difference for people and alleviating some global poverty and helping some people out, I think that is, kind of the path that we're on right now.
So I want to make sure everybody knows this Carpenter Project. Again, you can go to carpenterproject.org. This is a nonprofit, and so people could give to this and deduct it from their taxes.
That's right. It is a nonprofit, so that's we kind of have two paths of raising money right now. So one of them is kind of the one-for-one model that we're doing, and the other is just for donation. And so either way, we're working on. It costs about $3,000 to build a house, so we're trying to come up with a couple different models that people can come together, or a group or a class or something like that can kind of pool money together, and then from a new construction is generally we provide the whole $3,000. And so whenever we build a new custom home, that builds another home in Africa.
Wow. Yeah, I'm reading right here. We exist to provide sustainable housing for high-needs refugees. We are currently working to build homes for refugees seeking asylum in Uganda. Man, this has got to be, it's a huge responsibility. And I just think this is one of the reasons I really wanted to highlight, your construction business, because you're not only, providing a service and selling that service for a profit, but you're also giving back. And you do that. I mean, I see here this verse. Let's see, where did it go? The verse from Isaiah that I saw here, Isaiah 58:12. Tell us about that, about to be the builders of broken walls.
Yeah, that kind of was really the seed that kind of started the whole thing for me. I found that on one of my first trips to Mexico, and that really just spoke to me about, I felt like the Lord was really talking to me at that moment of kind of being the rebuilder of broken walls and the repair of dwellings, because that was something I knew how to do. From an early age, I grew up riding around with my grandpa in his truck and pretending to be a builder when I was 5 years old. And so just growing up in that industry, I was like, hey, this is something that I can do. And especially it hit me just once I left America, how truly blessed that we are to live here. I think that it's kind of our responsibility to help people out. Like, I think that that's one thing that from whom much is given, much is expected, and I don't take that lightly. I laugh and joke about it because that's what Uncle Ben told Peter Parker when it kind of motivated him to be Spider-Man, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's just when you're given something. I grew up in Fayetteville. When you're given something, I think that we can kind of give back and help people. So we've done some local projects around here in the Northwest Arkansas area. We've built some decks for some people and handicap ramps and stuff like that. But really, for me, it was just astonishing how in so many parts of the impoverished people around the world, how they live, and how really a small amount of money can make a difference.
Well, and also I'm reading here, when you guys go in there, you're also paying local workers. So you.
Yeah, that's right. That was a really important thing for us, was that we didn't want it to just be something that some Americans were coming in and we were just going to drop off a house. That was a big criticism that Tom's got, was that they're just dropping off shoes and then leaving. So
yeah, and destroying the market. They would also hurt the other market involved. But if you're actually employing workers there, you're actually contributing to their economy.
Yeah, and that's really something that we have been super happy with our partners in Uganda, because we're in these refugee camps and they get probably 200, 300 refugees a week or more. And there's just no economy there in these camps. They're supposed to be temporary camps, but Africa is just so unstable right now that these people end up staying there for years. And there's just...
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program. Happy Friday to everybody out there. It's Johnny Cash Friday. We're going to get to as much Johnny Cash music as we can, while at the same time peppering in the news and events of the day. We've got an event coming up on the 22nd, so that's a Tuesday. It's Quest for Quality of Life event. It will be at First let's see, what does it say here? First National Bank Community Room in Jonesboro, Tuesday, October 22nd from 6:30 to 8. And there'll be several guest speakers there. One of them is Pastor Iverson Jackson, who's the senior pastor of Zoe Bible Church in Little Rock. And he is, many of you out there have listened to him, heard him in conservative circles. He's very, very dynamic. And he joins us on the phone right now. Pastor Iverson Jackson, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great, Paul. How are you today?
I am doing well, sir. I really appreciate you spending some time with us. So I read that this event that you're going to be speaking at again on Tuesday it has to do with community leaders discussing their thoughts on quality of life for individuals, for families, for communities. So what's appealing to this event for you? What do you plan to discuss?
Well, we're going to talk about how that quality of life can, how people can experience that on an individual, community, group level. And, how to do that. And, I look at it like this, Paul, when I think in terms of quality of life and what that means to us as an individual and what it can mean to a community, and just reflect back on my own life. And you just don't know what you don't know. And until you are exposed to something better, then, sometimes people think they really have a great quality of life. But until you're exposed or made aware of things that are better, you don't really strive. Many people won't strive to have a better life. And then there are those that just don't know that you can. And there are many opportunities, particularly, you're talking about we're in America. This is America. We are the light for the world, if you will. So why should anyone in this country live a lower standard when higher standards are available for us? And that's what we're going to be talking about. And just letting the people know what are things that you can shoot for, and they're very obtainable in this country.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, is it kind of geared towards people from from all socioeconomic backgrounds, or
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I'm 57 years of age, not old. 57 years of age, and the first house that we lived in, Paul, now I'll say it like this, a little crude, but let me say it like this. First house that we lived in, my parents, my mother and her husband bought a house in 1972. It was the first house that we lived in that had running water. Now, you can figure out what all goes along with that, so I'll just leave it at that. That had running water. So our standard of living went up substantially. Now, here's the thing, is I never considered, when you reflect back as a child, of course, I didn't think that we were poor. And I didn't know that we were poor until someone told us that we were poor. Now, my mother always strived to do better. But as a child, I didn't know because I was happy, I was fed, I had shelter. But there certainly was a higher standard of living, which, having water in the house is much higher standard of living than not having water. So I know we don't have those extremes today as such, but there's a higher standard of living that we can all obtain if we're willing to work for it.
Do you think we kind of take? I mean, that's an interesting aspect. I think sometimes we take for granted, how far we've come in terms of that, and we are obviously all trying to. I feel like what the government's responsibility is certainly increasing. What we expect, what some people expect, maybe not me. I'm a pretty small government guy, but a lot of people expect government to do just more and more and more and more stuff. Whether it's I don't know, building water parks now. That's apparently a big deal. Versus other public works projects.
Well, Paul, did you notice I did not mention government in there?
Yes.
I did not mention government in there. My mother still lives in that house. She's been there now for 47 years in that house. Same community, pretty stable community. And the reason, there's another guy that grew up in the community there, and one day we ran into each other and started talking about the old times, back in the early 70s when we moved there in 1972 when my parents moved there. And this is part of the quality of life. We were talking about the community then. We said, wow, that community has been stable for all these years, almost a half a century. And we thought about, okay, there were 62 houses there, and all but about 5 houses, maybe five, families had a man and a woman, or a mother and a father, if you will, living there in that home, and you had a intact families that made that community stable, and it's still stable, and provided that higher quality of life than a lot of the people that live around us, outside of that little community. So when you're talking about quality of life, it's not just the material things, we know that make a quality of life, but a stable families, intact families. Now, if you want to talk about the government, that's where the government came in and kind of lowered the quality of life by dividing families up. And so, no, we don't look to government to improve our quality of life.
Well, okay, we're talking, folks, if you're just joining us, we're talking to the senior pastor of Zoe Bible Church in Little Rock. His name's Iverson Jackson. I think that's such an important point that you just made, the idea of the disintegration of the American family. And
yes, sir.
I feel like, the more that occurs, the more people do look to government to try to fix that problem. And I bet as a pastor you would argue that, maybe while the government might do some good things here and there with that, I mean, that's something that needs to be fixed by personal relationships with other people, and that's best found with, sending people from biblical churches, into communities to love on folks, right? I mean, that
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the government does have its place. We know that. I mean, it better have its place because we pay taxes.
Yeah.
So certainly there is a role there, and that may be in the form of grants and things to help build infrastructure so that these communities can be built. But after that, their hands really should be out of that and allow, people who know how to put families together, help keep families together, like the church and other community groups that specialize in that. Intact. You just can't beat an intact home, whatever else you come up with. And we've seen government housing, when government tries to get into the housing business, or the government is in the housing business. We know what that looks like, and that's not what. As a matter of fact, no community wants to live beside government housing. That's sad to say, because it's like saying those people aren't as good as we are, and we know that's not the truth. We're all the same in God's sight, so that's not it. But we know what is the issue is when you have single-parent homes, and this is not, my opinion. We now have 60 years of statistics to prove that this is correct. When you have single-parent homes, it's just a much, much more difficult, because that's not God's design.
Oh, yeah.
In that single-family home. So when we talk about quality of life and experiencing that, then we're talking about, the whole thing, not just material upgrade.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. The Heritage Foundation and other organizations, they look at poverty and stuff like that, and they say this is not just simply a lack of material things. You look at the relationships that maybe just are not there that are disintegrated, falling apart all around them. That also seems to be a thing. Let me ask you this, Pastor Jackson. So as a pastor, I kind of have a question: which came first, the chicken or the egg? Now there are some people that say, okay, that the reason government welfare exploded, or this new mission, was because churches were not doing their job, taking care of the poor and everything else. And so then there was a need and the government was forced to step in. And then there are other people that maybe don't see it that way, that the church was doing this and the government kind of supplanted them in the way of, if a church is being charitable towards this person or that person and they're continuing to make mistakes, they're continuing to just kind of not listen, then at some point, you pull back. But the government pretty much has a one-size-fits-all, and you can end up with generational dependency. So what are your thoughts as a pastor looking at the history of America? Was the church failing, and is that why government stepped in, or is it something different?
No, the church was not failing. I think the church, once the government stepped in, I think the church did say, oh, okay, we got some relief here. But no, the church wasn't failing, because, let me say this, it's not the church's responsibility to take care of people. It's the church's, from the standpoint of putting them in houses and things like that, it's the church's responsibility to teach them how to take care of themselves and how to provide for their families and how to properly, keep a family intact and start a family. You think about it like this. And I know that if you are a teenager, and you have a child, we're talking about this day and time, not 100 years ago when that wasn't unusual. When you have a child, it's much more difficult to do anything. You kind of have a setback from the very beginning. So when you're talking about the government's responsibility versus the churches is a lifelong, because you're teaching that person from the time they come into this world to be holding the biblical standards. Now, if someone doesn't like that, then I can't help that one way or another as far as that's concerned. But the biblical standards have proven, meaning that you hold off until with certain relationships until you are married and established. Now that you just can't beat that formula there. And I think the government, whether it was maniacal or not, I think it was, came in with a plan to say we can help you, but you have to do this. And like I know, if the government comes in, there's always a hitch, always without exception, 100%. Now, here's the thing. Think about this. When I ask people, when Dr. King, the March on Washington, and all those things took place, what was it about? What was it about? And folks would say, equal rights and all these things. I said, no, go back and look at it and think about, really, look at the signs that were there at the march. Look at what were they saying? Jobs. They were not saying handouts. When Dr. King was killed, 1968, in Memphis, Tennessee, what was he there about? Jobs. Dr. King was not saying, give us housing, give us this, give us that. He was saying, give us an equal opportunity to get a job, and we'll provide the rest for ourselves because our God is able to take care of us. And that's where the message got twisted after he was, gone off the scene. He was not begging for handouts. That was not it at all, in the least bit. It was the March on Washington for jobs.
Well, let me ask you about this. What was the last question, because we're running out of time. We're talking with Pastor Iverson Jackson. In that vein, I mean, with the President Donald Trump, what he's been doing, right now we have record low unemployment in the African American community. I mean, are you surprised by that?
No, I'm not, because Donald Trump, remember during the debate, one of the debates, and he just really kind of quelched the whole group when he said, I'm the only one on this stage that has created jobs. So it's something he knows how to do. And if you look at his record, you don't have to, again, you don't have to take anyone's word. Just go back and look at his record. And he's been doing this. His company years and years ago, when their makeup was 25% minority, and they weren't just ground pounders, through the system. So no, he's a man who knows how to create jobs, and he always paid his employees a good fair wage, not the minimum wage, but a
Wow.
good fair wage. So no, I'm not surprised about that at all, and no one should be. The man is a billionaire. He knows how to create wealth,
So
and you do that by helping other people.
there are some people saying that there's going to be a new record set in 2020 in terms of how many African Americans, the percentage that are going to vote for Donald Trump. Do you think it may be a record?
I do. I really do. And not everybody that you talk to are willing to come forth, and say I support President Trump like me, and I respect that. That's fine, because what's more important is what you do in the voting booth. And as I talk, I'm a small business owner. I deal with a lot of other small business owners, minority, all different types, but we're speaking to this respect. So, and they like what's taking place. They like, the work picking up and contracts picking up. So, yeah, why would you go backwards when you're moving forward? That doesn't make sense at all. We have to look at the numbers. We can't go by our feelings or what somebody else thinks. Man, when you've got to meet a contract, you don't care what color a person is. You want to know what they're going to do, if the policies they're putting in place are causing the economy to go, and they are. So there's no arguing about that.
Yeah. Pastor Iverson Jackson, I appreciate it. I want to remind everybody you're going to be in Jonesboro Tuesday, October 22nd at 6:30,
Yes, sir.
First National Bank Community Room, at this Quest for Quality of Life event hosted by State Representative Dan Sullivan. I know it's going to be a great event, and I know you're certainly going to provide and make the conversation very interesting, and I really appreciate you spending some time with us this morning, sir.
Well, thank you, Paul. It's always great to talk with you, be on your program, and just keep it going, man. We love it.
All right.
We love it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Pastor Jackson. We appreciate you. Folks, we're also going to be talking later on at the bottom of this hour. State Representative Dan Sullivan will be here in studio, I'm told. Thought it was going to be via phone, but he's going to be right here. So stay tuned for that. Also, we're going to give you a China update when we come back. Don't go anywhere. I want to tell you a little bit more about what's going on with Hong Kong and China and Arkansas. Don't go anywhere. Back in a moment.
No opportunity for employment there. So really what we do is in the cost of the house, we factor in the cost of labor and material. So we've got local craftsmen there that make the blocks for the walls. We buy the sheet metal for the roofs there locally. Then we hire local people in the camps to do the buildings for us. And so it seems like for us that's important, that we're kind of trying to be a little bit of an economic engine in these camps while also providing for the most vulnerable. So specifically in these camps, we're building for, they call them extremely vulnerable people. So those are elderly, handicapped, or single mothers with children.
Yeah.
Just because, once they get to these camps in Africa or settlements, they're just sort of given a packet of materials and say, okay, go, set up or build a house for yourself. They don't really do anything past that. So, that's
Wow.
we've got some good partners over there that we're working with.
Absolutely. Folks, if you're just joining us, we're talking with Will Hansen of Hansen Brothers Construction. Find out more at hansenbrothersconstruction.com. Also, this Carpenter Project, where they're helping people in Uganda who don't have homes, extremely vulnerable people. That's carpenterproject.org if you want to see that. Now, back to the construction side here in Arkansas when you're working on homes. I mean, is there anything in your industry like that makes it harder for you guys to do what you're trying to do, which is effectively help people and give people the homes that they want?
Yeah, there's a few things. Actually, I just spent about 5 hours at a city council meeting in Fayetteville last night that a large group of builders were at to discuss some building ordinance changes. And so that's something that, as it seems like just whenever new people get elected, everyone always feels like they need to come up with new rules. So construction and building codes are a pretty easy target that they want to kind of change things up. And usually there's a lot of resistance from, building people when it comes to that. So that's probably just working within the parameters that, we've got up here in Northwest Arkansas. We've got these 4 big cities. So you kind of have to be well-versed on everything because there's not a unified system. Each city kind of has their own rules and codes. So sometimes that can be kind of difficult to juggle.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Especially you mentioned every time somebody gets elected, they feel like they want to change something or do something when it comes to this. I mean, that makes it hard for you guys as small business owners to keep up with the regulations, and it's hard to predict what predictability is what a small business owner wants in relation to the government, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And in construction, it's not something that can, once, especially with developers or big homes, once something gets going, it's kind of hard to change things midstream. So, sometimes some of these ordinances and codes can change pretty quickly. So, that's definitely something that we have to stay on top of.
Yeah, I see this one, and again, this is from 5 News Online from the 15th. Talks about what are they trying to regulate the width and length of driveways now?
Here we go.
Yeah, they were in Fayetteville.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. China secretly ordered the NBA commissioner to fire the Rockets general manager over the Hong Kong tweet. Quote, "We made clear that we were being asked to fire him by the Chinese government, by the parties we dealt with, government and business," Silver said in his first U.S. interview about the league's ongoing free speech scandal. "We said there's no chance that's happening. There's no chance we'll ever discipline him." Wow. First freedom of speech, because this is America. But boy, are we still loyal. Have you guys seen LeBron's what was it, Mao? Yeah, LeBron Zedong. Have you seen that? He's got the receding hairline, and they put LeBron's face on Chairman Mao, and it's LeBron Zedong. Man, that's funny. I also saw another funny LeBron meme with Winnie the Pooh and a pile of money, but it's a little too explicit meme to share, but it's I couldn't help but laugh. Oh, man. Speaking of China, though, we do really want to know at some point, does Arkansas's economic development leadership, Ace Hutchinson and Mike Preston, do they support a free Hong Kong? This is a flashback updated September 30th, 2017. I just want to remind you guys, this was from the Epic Times. It was sent to me by a friend who's been following our China coverage. He was still alive. Doctor explains forced organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners. There was bleeding. He was still alive. Chinese doctor Enver Todi recalled to a panel of experts on China's lucrative practice of organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience. Now, I understand the Arkansas General Assembly, they passed a resolution condemning State Representative Dan Sullivan sponsored, who's going to be in the studio here in just a minute, by the way. He actually sponsored a resolution that passed the Arkansas House condemning Chinese organ harvesting. I wonder if some of those state House members, when they were voting for that resolution, also were like, why are we trying to bring the communist Chinese here? The main body of victims of these organ transplants is from practitioners of Falun Gong, a peaceful traditional meditation practice whose main tenets are truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. The Chinese Communist Party launched a brutal persecution against the practitioners in 1999, which continues to this day. Hundreds of thousands of practitioners are being removed from the streets because they're a political inconvenience for the CCP, and then they're being killed. They're being hooked up to machines where their organs are kept oxygenated and alive, and then they're sold. They sell their organs, their eyeballs, their kidneys, their hearts, their lungs, their liver. And folks, it's absolutely like modern day atrocities. And yet the NBA and LeBron Zedong has to bow down to the Chinese government. These Chinese deals be coming into Arkansas. They're a Trojan horse. They need to stop. I for one, would welcome and congratulate and be so thankful if our Arkansas leadership would just come out and say we're done doing business with the Chinese, directly bringing their businesses over here, because it's just not safe for the country. Back in just a moment.
large group of builders were at to discuss some building ordinance changes. And so that's something that, as it seems like just whenever new people get elected, everyone always feels like they need to come up with new rules. So construction and building codes are a pretty easy target that they want to kind of change things up. And usually there's a lot of resistance from, building people when it comes to that. So that's probably just working within the parameters that, we've got up here in Northwest Arkansas, we've got these 4 big cities. So you kind of have to be well versed on everything because there's not a unified system. Each city kind of has their own rules and codes. So sometimes that can be kind of difficult to juggle.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Especially you mentioned every time somebody gets elected, they feel like they want to change something or do something when it comes to this. I mean, that makes it hard for you guys as small business owners to keep up with the regulations, and it's hard to predict what predictability is what a small business owner wants in relation to the government, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And in construction, it's not something that can, once, especially with developers or big homes, once something gets going, it's kind of hard to change things midstream. So, sometimes some of these ordinances and codes can change pretty quickly. So that's definitely something that we have to stay on top of.
Yeah, I see this one, and again, this is from 5 News Online from the 15th. Talks about what are they trying to regulate, the width and length of driveways now? Is that what I'm reading?
Yeah, they were in Fayetteville. They're trying to regulate the width of driveways, so it would affect basically driveways for 2-car garages. And they were talking about trying to make the garages go, you have to have your garages on the side or the back of the house. And so it's just kind of things like that, we went to the meeting and they told us that we didn't really understand what was going on, but we also weren't really being provided with a good explanation of what was going on.
Yeah.
And so that's why there was, a 5-hour meeting for that.
That's interesting. I had a class when I was in college, 10 plus years ago. And I remember the professor talking about how, and he was lamenting this, that garages face the street now, and driveways are on the front of the house, and how before we were so car-centric, the garages were on the side, and it was nicer and everything else, and cars were a part of our life. And it really was part of this idea of wanting to go backwards, and I don't know if that's the city council's idea here, but it kind of seems like, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like they just would rather us walk, and not. Yeah,
drive. Well, and that's especially up here in Northwest Arkansas. We've got all these trails, so they definitely, we've got a great walkable and bikeable community. But, I like to consider Northwest Arkansas really just one big city. We've got these 4 cities up here, but everyone, we drive the highways right here. You can get to Bentonville in 15 minutes. So, we've got walkable areas, but we can't pretend like people aren't driving. And also with construction codes, we can't, sometimes the city councils and stuff try to dictate.
All right, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the program.
We got what the free market is.
State Representative Dan Sullivan is in studio with us. Dan, how's it going, sir?
Great, Paul. Always good to be here on Johnny Cash Friday.
Yeah, man.
Always a little more energy, and just love those songs and love the Friday show.
Oh yeah, it's always great to have you in. So what can you tell us about this event? This it's a Quest for Quality event. Like what's the genesis of this?
Well, I think Team Jonesboro and the citizens, when we started this conversation about what the need for quality in Jonesboro, I think everybody agrees that we all want to live in a quality community and somewhere where the quality of life is really good. So we started that conversation, and I met multiple times with people around the community on what their ideas were of quality, what quality looked like to them. I talked with people from Team Jonesboro, and we really had really good conversations. Paul, I heard a song the other day. I don't like the song, but I love the title. It says, "Save our planet, reduce vitriolic emissions."
Okay.
It's a bad song.
Okay.
But the idea that we can't talk past each other.
Yeah.
We can't just be angry with one another. It came up in the conversation about the library, and I think you read an article from the Jonesboro Sun accusing people of being having vitriolic language.
Yeah.
And it's true, there is some. I never heard any threats, and I was disappointed with our schools, as you expressed, that they would cancel this because of safety. There were never, that I saw, any threats or any hostile.
No. That's just the people on the left. They try to immediately act like the right's going to get violent, and we were just this ridiculous.
Well, and in this context, that for me to sit down with people in our community and really have good conversations about quality, it just made me think we need to continue that discussion, and in a very way that will bring about change.
Yeah.
And to do that, we have to respect one another. We have to listen. We have to respond to them, and again, just listen to what the other side says. So in that, I thought, well, let's just continue that discussion, and let's have another event and talk about quality. We've invited Team Jonesboro people to be there. They haven't confirmed they will, but I've invited people. I've invited our mayor. I've invited our county judge. I've invited many of our officials around our community. Matter of fact, I'll send out an invite to our superintendents today.
Yeah.
Because everyone needs to have a voice in what quality looks like. And I tell you, I'm really excited about the people that we're having. You just had Iverson on.
Yeah.
What a great communicator.
Yeah, he's just I didn't read his full bio here, but I mean, obviously he is very accomplished in currently right now. I mean, aside from the degrees and the work he's done, and I believe he even served in the military as well.
Yeah.
Right now, he serves as the National Vice President for STAND, Staying True to America's National Destiny. He serves locally in his community as a chairperson on the Wrightsville Planning Commission, the 145th Street Water and Sewer Board, and the Quail Creek Volunteer Fire Department. And then, of course, Dr. Philip Fletcher. He's going to be...
Where do you meet Phil? I hope your listeners will tune in on Monday to hear Phil, because Dr. Fletcher is quite an accomplished gentleman also. I met Phil at a meeting in Conway one day and was so impressed. I went down to Conway just to go to his mission, City of Hope. And he works with poverty community there in Conway. He has spoken to mayors groups and leadership groups, spoken at universities. He's quite an accomplished man, and I just was so impressed. And then, of course, Felicia Johnson-Cobb here in Jonesboro, again, a woman who knows what she believes and is free to express it.
Love
and
Felicia,
just
man.
Love her too. And these people, I don't agree with all of them all the time. I've read some things by Phil that I just kind of go, whoa, let me think about that. Again, Felicia will come out with what she believes, and it really stimulates my thoughts. And those are the kind of people that we're going to have at this Quest for Quality, and I've done my best not to reel them in. I'm going to let them go wherever they want, and I know they will.
Just let's have a discussion about it.
And then, of course, we'll have a question and answer after. Again, I asked the mayor to be there and to ask some questions at that meeting. I've asked other prominent people in our community to be a part of it. So I'm just really excited about the opportunity for our community to expand that conversation about what quality is in our life.
Yeah.
I was at the Chris Ann Hall, was here just a few days ago. Last week, and Chris Ann had a couple of statements that really caught me. One of them was that liberty equals freedom plus morality. Now, you see that statement all across, and many other people have made a similar statement, but it's very true that when we're going to have expressed the liberty or have experienced the liberty that our Constitution allows us to have, then we must have the freedom, but we also must link it to morality. And I think I heard you talking about that earlier. You're talking about us having Chinese businesses and the trans conversation that we're having at the library. Our Constitution allows for freedom for all. And it's big enough whether you're a Chinese American or a business wanting to move into our state and our nation, or whether you're trans, or whether wherever you are, gay, whatever you choose to identify as, the Constitution gives all of us those freedoms, but they have to be linked with a moral nation. And throughout our nation's history, we've evolved that conversation about what morality looks like. And we will continue to do that.
I don't know if we've evolved it. What's the word for
devolved?
Devolve.
Yeah. Well, have you, the conversation, my point is the
It's
conversation is a valid conversation for us to continue. You know, women's rights years ago, we had a completely different view of what the rights of women were. Minority populations. We've always had those debates over what it looked like. And those are great debates to have. That's what I hope we'll get into with this quest for quality. It's not just about new facilities and pools and bike paths and other things, but there's a moral side of our quest for quality. There's the life side of quest for quality and what that looks like. Personally, I think that's why I moved back to Jonesboro, because of the moral sense that we have in our community and how important that is. So we're going to get into some of that at our discussion next Tuesday. I hope all your listeners will be there. We'll be live streaming on my website also for those that can't be there. So again, I think it's just a great opportunity. And if nothing else, please come and meet with our guests. By the way, we're also having a community luncheon here in Jonesboro at Front Page on Tuesday at noon. Anybody that wants to come up can meet with us and have lunch with us and meet our guests. We're also going to be touring Jonesboro. Again, I've reached out to leaders in our community, the mayor and the county judge and others, just asking them if we can drop by and to meet these gentlemen and ladies to hear what they have to say and help us shape and give fullness to what a quest for quality was for all of our citizens. And, you know, Iverson put it really well when he talked about where he started out in life with a home with no running water. And in his quest for quality, you know, he has achieved all the things that he's done. And he has fought that fight and lived that life. And he's achieved a great quality of life. And you'll hear the same from Phil. You'll hear the same from Felicia. So what great examples of people who have faced challenges in the quest for quality, and what a great opportunity for our community to hear those people and question them and talk about what we can do in our community.
Yeah. And I was talking to somebody the other day talking about, you know, we do, there's got to be some, like you said, it's more than just, you know, new facilities, if you will. You know, there's also also the desire to not leave communities behind as well. You know, and this is something that's not talked about on the right.
Yeah, you know, and I fully support our library's ability to bring in people of different persuasions, whatever those perspectives, whatever those are. I support that. It's a good thing. However, I also support educational freedom. And if citizens don't want to send their children to public schools that are going to be going down that route, the result to me is not to prevent public schools from participating. The issue to me is to give people who choose not to participate in that the freedom not to choose public schools if public schools are going to go down that line.
Well, I mean, here's my thing with the whole. For those of you that are just joining us, we're talking with State Representative Dan Sullivan, and there has been some developments in the local community. You know, where he represents the county library. You know, was going to have a teen trans author in to talk about a book that apparently has been successful, but they were going to, during school hours for a field trip, they were going to bus the students over to listen to the author. And I understand it. I think it was a voluntary field trip, but still, I remember when field trips were just like, hey, we're going to go to the woods and we're going to go to the park. This is our field trip. We're going to, I don't know, go to a research lab and learn. It's like, no, now we're going to, you know, get involved in these very hot button social issues. And we're going to use taxpayer dollars to bus kids over during school hours.
That's why we fight for local freedom with our local school board. The local school board, just like the library commission, the library board has decisions to make. Our local school boards do. And I support that. And if their local school board supports that, that's up to them. You know, we had a bill before the legislature last session to allow Planned Parenthood access to our health curriculum, which would have been embedded in other subject areas. The bill failed.
I remember that.
Yeah, but it's going to come up again. And at some point, parents are going to say, I choose not to send my child to public school. And I support their freedom of choice to choose another form of education. And they have multiple now. I don't want to get into educational freedom, but if we have to allow our libraries and our public schools choice. I support that. But equally important is allowing families choice. And if they choose, if our public schools go down this path too far, then our parents and families are going to choose not to send their children there.
Yeah, or you start to even start thinking even bigger in terms of legislatively. I guess I've got some nieces and they're in public school in Texas of all places, and I mean, man, you just wouldn't believe some of this climate change rhetoric that's now being taught. They're scaring these kids to death. I mean, they think that they're not gonna live to their 18th birthday, some of them. And so this is a curriculum, I'm sure, that's being taught in some schools in Arkansas as well. And at some point you get to the point where you're like, right, okay, well, are we going to bail on the public school system and start to seek other opportunities elsewhere? And I think, honestly, the only way you would get, in some cases it may be, and I don't want to, the only way you might get to the point where the parents have control and the school board has more control is if the money starts to follow the parent. Because once that happens, there won't be any of this politically correct nonsense that the majority of people disagree with. We're not talking about violating anybody's rights. We're just, like you said, the moral standard. All of a sudden now, the personal moral convictions of the majority are now reflected in the curriculum and what's acceptable behavior, what's not acceptable behavior.
Paul, I talked to multiple religious leaders in our community, church pastors and others, over this issue, and told them, expressed to them, as a legislator, my goal is to protect religious freedom. It's not to force religion on other people.
Correct.
It's to protect the people's right to choose and express their religion. And at some point, our Constitution calls for a free public education for all. When that was written, the original intent was very narrow. It was for the reading, writing, and math and the core curricula. And our schools since then have expanded that definition of education tremendously. But that was never the original intent. And at some point, people are going to say, I'm done paying for those social issues and moral issues. I want my child, and I want to use my money as I can. I've drifted away from a quest for quality.
No, but it's very much connected in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. And that's why we're doing this event on Tuesday. We want to have these kinds of conversations and not talk past each other, but listen. And be respectful of what our Constitution says, the freedom that offers all people, the liberties that it offers all people, and our laws protect those freedoms and those liberties.
Yeah.
However you identify, whatever your moral and religious convictions are, our Constitution protects those. I shouldn't say whatever they are, because there are some that are outside the norm.
Yeah, but that's good.
But that's the premise.
I appreciate
and
you.
I hope our community leaders will come.
Yeah.
And if you can encourage our mayor's office to come, our county judge, or other county elected officials and other elected officials in our community, please encourage them to come.
Yeah.
Again, you talk with Iverson, and the listeners had a good sense of him. Once you talk to Phil Fletcher, you will be so impressed. You'll want to have him back. And the same thing with Felicia.
Yeah, it's going to be a great panel.
You've
assembled a fantastic panel. It's going to be really
good.
And
I won't be on it, by the way.
Yeah.
We're going to let those other folks talk and let our people listen and share.
Real quick before we go, how's your campaign for Senate going? Is it going good?
It's going really well, and I appreciate the question. We're excited about the campaign. I'm running for the Senate against current Senator John Cooper. Matter of fact, I just sent John an email yesterday asking him for 3 debates before the primary. So I haven't had a response yet, but I look forward to John and me sitting down around the table and maybe on 3 different topics. Maybe we can even come on your show and do a debate. Maybe
well,
you
I
can
mean, they're
send
certainly
an
welcome,
email.
but something tells me that he would. John might think that I'm a little biased.
Well, whatever the format is.
I don't know why.
Wherever
I don't know
we go.
why.
Well,
I could just ask
the
questions.
voters of our district deserve for us to sit down and have a
completely
real
agree with that.
conversation about the issues, just like
And
you and I
I'll
talked
just
today.
play your answers on the radio. That's what I will do. I'll just come record it, and we'll play the answers on the radio.
Well, when John responds, I'll let you know, because we'll set up the venues and locations, and
Okay.
I'm sure we'll have some.
Well, that's good. Yeah, it's always good, and that's the primary's March 3rd.
March 3rd.
March 3rd.
Early
so,
voting is 2 weeks prior.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting primary season. Really, we'll be looking at these races all across the state. State Representative Dan Sullivan, it's always great to talk to you, sir. Good luck
Thanks,
on this
Paul.
event Tuesday. I would be there, but I'm going to be in Stuttgart at
That's
the
right.
Arkansas Republican County Committee meeting. I'll be giving a presentation.
Everybody had their conflicts all over.
I know.
Busy season, but you can tune in, watch it, live stream us online. Sullivan for Arkansas, and catch it.
All right, Dan Sullivan, everybody. We are going to take a break and be back with your meme of the day in just a moment.
And like you said with that professor about how that changed with garages being at the front of the house, that was primarily just for, to create a more affordable house. I mean, we're seeing, if you look at houses that were being built in the 90s that were, a starter house or what we call an affordable house versus what's, a starter or affordable house being built now in 2019, they're drastically different. And just the amenities and the size comparison there's no comparison. Between something that was built 20 or 30 years ago. And that's just because of the way the industry's changed, the way that products have evolved, and how plans have changed in layout. So they're kind of trying to, it seems like a lot of places are saying, well, we want higher density and we don't want urban sprawl, but that's not really what the market wants. I mean, people want to have houses and they want to be close to stuff. That's why people move to Northwest Arkansas, because we've got so many wonderful amenities here. People don't want to live in high-rises. They want to have a backyard. They want to have a nice two-car garage. So, we've seen this area of Arkansas really explode. We're blessed to have, a couple huge, businesses here. We get a lot of people move in from all over the world.
Yeah.
I just think it's cool that we're able to provide people really with whatever they want. If they want to live downtown in an apartment, we've got 4 downtowns for them to live in. If they want to have a farm or if they want to live in a neighborhood, we've got all those options. So I think that's something important for builders and any sort of elected official to remember. Just like, let's let people do whatever they want. Let's just kind of give them the freedom to do that.
Let's let them decide, and if they
Absolutely.
I totally agree. And let's let the builders build what they want to build, if it's a spec home or if it's a custom home. Do what you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they wouldn't be building them if they weren't selling.
That's exactly right. Will Hanson, again, Hanson Brothers Construction, Hanson Brothers Building and Landscaping. You can go to hansonbrothersconstruction.com. And don't forget about this nonprofit as well that Will heads up, the Carpenter Project, carpenterproject.org, where they are, hiring local workers in Uganda, and they're trying to put a roof over somebody's head. And Will, I appreciate it, sir. I appreciate how Christian ethic is governing not only how you conduct yourself in the for-profit business, but in the nonprofit side. And I really appreciate it, and it's been great talking to you this morning.
Hey, thanks, Paul. I really appreciate it. And yeah, if anybody has a question about the construction business or the nonprofit, feel free to reach out to me. I believe my phone number and email address should be on both websites.
Okay.
So I'd be happy to talk to anybody if they're interested in getting involved in the Carpenter Project. That's something that we're really passionate about. So feel free to reach out.
Again, the website, so it's carpenterproject.org, and as well as hansonbrothersconstruction.com. Will, I appreciate it, sir. Let's do it again sometime.
All right, we'll do it, Paul. Thank you.
All righty, folks, back in just a moment.
And like you said with that professor about how that changed with garages being at the front of the house, that was primarily just for, to create a more affordable house. I mean, we're seeing, if you look at houses that were being built in the 90s that were, a starter house or what we call an affordable house versus what's, starter or affordable house being built now in 2019. They're drastically different. And just the amenities and the size comparison there's no comparison between something that was built 20 or 30 years ago. And that's just because of the way the industry's changed, the way that products have evolved, and how plans have changed in layout. So they're kind of trying to, it seems like a lot of places are saying, well, we want higher density and we don't want urban sprawl, but that's not really what the market wants. I mean, people want to have houses and they want to be close to stuff. That's why people move to Northwest Arkansas, because we've got so many wonderful amenities here. People don't want to live in high-rises. They want to have a backyard. They want to have a nice two-car garage. So, we've seen this area of Arkansas really explode. We're blessed to have, a couple huge, businesses here. We get a lot of people move in from all over the world.
Yeah.
I just think it's cool that we're able to provide people really with whatever they want. If they want to live downtown in an apartment, we've got 4 downtowns for them to live in. If they want to have a farm, or if they want to live in a neighborhood, we've got all those options. So I think that's something important for builders and any sort of elected official to remember. Just like, let's let people do whatever they want. Let's just kind of give them the freedom to do that.
Let's let them decide, and if they
Absolutely.
So I totally agree. And let's let the builders build what they want to build. If it's a spec home or if it's a custom home, do what you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they wouldn't be building them if they weren't selling.
That's exactly right. Will Hanson, again, Hanson Brothers Construction, Hanson Brothers Building and Landscaping. You can go to hansonbrothersconstruction.com. And don't forget about this nonprofit as well that Will heads up, the Carpenter Project, carpenterproject.org, where they are, hiring local workers in Uganda, and they're trying to put a roof over somebody's head. And Will, I appreciate it, sir. I appreciate how Christian ethic is governing not only how you conduct yourself in the for-profit business, but in the nonprofit side. And I really appreciate it, and it's been great talking to you this morning.
Hey, thanks, Paul. I really appreciate it. And, if anybody has a question about, the construction business or the nonprofit, feel free to reach out to me. I believe my phone number and email address should be on both websites.
Okay.
So I'd be happy to talk to anybody if they're interested in getting involved in the Carpenter Project. That's something that we're really passionate about. So feel free to reach out.
Again, the website, so it's carpenterproject.org, and as well as Hanson Brothers.
There we go. We have a little bit of time to get back to the meme of the day. We don't have much time, but here it is. Here is your meme of the day, ladies and gentlemen. What do we got for it? I can't even remember which one we decided. Oh, okay. Here we go. I love this one. This sums up the week in light of the fake ABC News reporting on the events in Syria, considering there's now a ceasefire. I compared the ceasefire. Donald Trump said, he said the other day at his rally in Dallas, which, by the way, Tom Arnold said that he wished, he compared the Dallas rally to JFK's Dallas rally, hoping that something bad would happen to Trump. Donald Trump, quote, "Without spilling a drop of American blood, not one drop of American blood, we've all agreed on a pause or a ceasefire. Sometimes you have to let them fight for a while. Then people realize how tough it is." I compared this with A Taste of Armageddon, a Star Trek episode where Kirk had to destroy the disintegration machines and the computer-simulated war and the actual taking of life in order to get people to realize that war is horrible and that gives you an excuse to end it. I bet Donald Trump's seen that episode. What do you want to bet? This meme of the day, courtesy of MAGAphone, M.A.G.A.phone. Breaking, Turkey attacks Kurdish base in Syria. Photo credit ABC News. And it's a photo of the blockbuster hit Independence Day when the alien ships attack the airbase. The U.S. Air Base in the middle of the desert. You remember that one? The pew, 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 pew. Anyway, we'll post this up at the Twitter. It's Conduit News on Twitter. And before we go, folks, I want to remind you, you need to donate to Conduit for Commerce. Go to conduitforcommerce.org and click Support Our Cause, give monthly, or you can give one-time donation. It's tax-free. Why not give the government less money as a tax-deductible donation? Give the people at Conduit for Commerce more. Stand in for Arkansas small business. standing up for your values, go to conduitforcommerce.org right now and click on support our cause. We'll see you back here on Monday. You guys have a great weekend.